The studio lights of the View glowed brighter than usual that morning, casting a polished shine across the iconic round table where conversations often turned into unforgettable television moments. The audience buzzed with anticipation, whispering and shifting in their seats as producers signaled that they were about to go live. It was supposed to be another lively discussion, another exchange of opinions, but no one knew that within minutes, the entire atmosphere would change. As the cameras rolled, the hosts greeted viewers with their usual energy. Joy Behar leaned slightly forward, her tone already sharp with curiosity as she introduced the day's special guest, none other than Dolly Parton. The audience erupted into applause as Dolly walked in, her presence warm yet commanding. She smiled graciously, waving with that unmistakable charm that had made her beloved across generations. Dolly took her seat, her posture relaxed, her eyes scanning the room with a calm confidence. She exchanged pleasantries, joked lightly, and for a moment, everything felt easy. The conversation began with safe ground, her music, her career, her philanthropy. Dolly answered with sincerity, weaving humor into her words, keeping both the hosts and audience engaged. But then the tone shifted. Joy tilted her head, her expression narrowing just slightly as she pivoted the conversation. Her voice carried a subtle edge now, probing deeper into topics that weren't as comfortable. She brought up criticism Dolly had faced over the years, questions about her image, her choices, and the way she navigated fame. The room grew quieter, the audience sensing the tension building. Dolly didn't interrupt. She listened. Joy continued, pressing further, her words now more pointed. She questioned whether Dolly had ever felt the need to change, who she was to fit expectations, whether her carefully crafted persona was more strategy than authenticity. A murmur rippled through the audience. It wasn't hostile, but it was noticeable. For a brief second, Dolly's smile softened, not disappearing, but shifting into something more measured. She adjusted her hands on the table, her fingers lightly interlaced, and leaned forward just a little. And then she spoke. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "I've always believed," Dolly began, her tone steady and unmistakably calm, "that people can see right through you if you're pretending to be something you're not." The studio fell silent. Even Joy paused, caught off guard by the quiet strength in Dolly's delivery. Dolly continued, her words flowing with clarity. She spoke about growing up with very little, about understanding early on that authenticity wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. She explained how every choice she made, from her appearance to her career decisions, came from a place of self-awareness, not insecurity. "I know exactly who I am," she said, her eyes now meeting Joy's directly. "And I don't feel the need to apologize for that." The audience reacted immediately. Soft applause at first, then louder, building into something more powerful. It wasn't just agreement. It was respect. Joy tried to interject, her expression a mix of surprise and determination. She asked another question, this time challenging Dolly's perspective more directly, suggesting that public figures often avoided accountability by hiding behind charm. Dolly didn't flinch. She leaned back slightly, her smile returning, but this time, it carried a sharper edge of confidence. "There's a difference," she replied, "between avoiding accountability and choosing kindness. I've always chosen kindness. That doesn't mean I don't stand my ground." The words landed with weight. The studio seemed to hold its breath. Even the other hosts, who usually jumped into discussions quickly, remained still, watching the exchange unfold. Dolly went on, her voice unwavering. She spoke about the importance of lifting people up rather than tearing them down, about how success didn't have to come at the expense of others. She didn't raise her voice, didn't show anger, but there was an undeniable firmness in every word she spoke. Joy, for once, had no immediate comeback. There was a pause, an unusual, almost surreal pause for a show known for its constant chatter. The cameras captured every expression, every subtle shift in body language. The audience sat completely still, absorbing the moment. Dolly glanced around the table, her gaze softening again. "We all have our ways of seeing the world," she added gently, "and that's okay. But I've learned that staying true to yourself is the only way to live without regrets." The silence broke, not with words, but with applause. It started from the audience and quickly grew louder, more insistent. Some people even stood, their admiration clear. Joy nodded slowly, her earlier intensity fading into something more reflective. She offered a brief acknowledgement, but the energy had shifted. The balance of the conversation had changed, and everyone in the room could feel it. The rest of the segment moved on, but it never quite returned to its earlier rhythm. There was a newfound respect in the way questions were asked, a carefulness that hadn't been there before. Dolly continued to speak with grace, sharing stories and insights, but the moment had already been made. When the show finally cut to commercial, the tension dissolved into quiet chatter. Audience members leaned toward each other, whispering about what they had just witnessed. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others smiled, clearly impressed. Back at the table, Dolly remained composed, exchanging a few light remarks, with the hosts as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But the atmosphere said otherwise. It wasn't about confrontation. It wasn't about winning an argument. It was about presence. Dolly hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't resorted to sharp retorts or dramatic gestures. Instead, she had done something far more powerful. She had stood firmly in her truth, unshaken, unbothered, and completely in control. As the show resumed and eventually came to an end, the audience gave her one final round of applause. Longer, louder, and more heartfelt than before. And as Dolly Parton walked off the set, her signature smile back in place, one thing was certain. The studio hadn't just fallen silent in that moment, it had listened.